Is eating a late dinner worse for your health? I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director at dietdoctor.com, and we have a new study that suggests that may be the case.
May be the case.
It's common folklore that if you eat late at night...
A study that says it may be the case. Jesus.
It's going to go straight to fat, and
Nice
it's
study.
worse off, and so you want to eat earlier. Or maybe it's because in the Mediterranean countries, that's the way they eat, and it tends to be, you know, sort of
Hello,
mirrored
Hans
with a
Eli.
healthy
This video is for you.
lifestyle. that
No
they
further
have.
links.
Their biggest meal is like a late lunch and then
Please.
a small snack for dinner. Well, it's nice to see more evidence sort of catching up with the folklore. And so I wrote a paper about a study that came out recently. There were 20 healthy volunteers. And what they did was they lived in an observational ward for 2 nights. The first day and night, everything was sort of normal. Then the second day, they were randomized to either having dinner at 6 p.m. and a small snack at 10 p.m. or a snack at 6 p.m. and dinner at 10 p.m. And then they measured blood sugar, they measured insulin, they measured cortisol, they measured how they slept, and then they measured their response to eating breakfast the next morning, with everybody eating breakfast at 8 a.m. Then 3 weeks later, they brought them back and they switched. So whichever protocol they were on before, they now did the other protocol. So everybody was randomized to sort of be their own control and compared to the other group. Now, what they found was pretty interesting. First, they wanted to see if sleep was affected, sleep quality, and they found it actually wasn't. So at least for a one-time eating dinner, a big meal late, didn't really make a difference. Oh, and I should also mention that the meal was 50% carbs, 35% fat, 15% protein. So again, not low carb, but again, that's not what they said they were setting out to measure, right? They were just wanted to measure the timing of the meal. They weren't so worried about the composition of the meal. So sleep pattern didn't matter, but blood sugar, oh my goodness, blood sugar definitely did matter. So the peak for the group having the later dinner was 150 milligrams per deciliter, whereas the peak for the group having the earlier dinner was 127. Same food, the exact same meal, just eating it 4 hours later made a 23 milligram per deciliter increase in the absolute rise of the blood sugar. But also, the group that ate dinner later, their blood sugar stayed elevated for 4 extra hours, 4 hours longer than the early dinner group. So, wow, for blood sugar, the same meal, the timing made a huge difference. But here's what's also interesting. The next morning, when they woke up, both groups had the same blood sugar. So by morning, it had normalized. And you can say, okay, well, the negative effect is over by morning. But no, after breakfast, the group that had the late dinner saw a higher rise in blood sugar compared to the group who ate the earlier dinner. So even though it looked like the effect was gone by the blood sugars normalizing, the effect was clearly still there, some element of insulin resistance. And the insulin, absolute insulin level, the absolute insulin exposure was not different between the groups, which is kind of interesting. So it was sort of the body was not able to mount the insulin response or wasn't able to respond appropriately to the insulin that was there. So after breakfast, the late group saw higher blood sugar rise. So you can imagine if that's repeated day after day after day after day, wow, that's a much greater exposure to elevated blood sugar simply by the time.
Here's the kicker though. I don't eat the breakfast.
Timing of the meal. Now, it would be interesting to know if this was
So maybe that is the strat.
a low carb or keto meal where you're going to have a lower blood sugar swing anyway. Would that make a difference? Interesting question. Don't know the answer to that based on this study. Cortisol was different as well. So cortisol, sort of the stress hormone, was higher in the group that had dinner late, and triglycerides. Triglycerides were higher in the group that had dinner late, and fatty acid oxidation was lower. So again, no change in what they ate, only a change in when they ate. Now, it would also have been interesting to see if they would have extended the time-restricted eating window by not eating breakfast or eating breakfast later, if that would have made a difference. But basically,
It
for a
does
randomized
make a
controlled trial,
difference.
you can't answer all those questions, right? You have to focus on one question and answer that very well in a controlled fashion. And that's what they did. So the timing of the meal clearly made a difference. So if you're at all able to control the timing of your meal, try and move it forward. If you can make your lunch or a late lunch your biggest meal of the day and dinner a smaller meal, that seems like it might be the way to go. Right? And
It might be the way to go.
We also have guides
I
on
don't know.
time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting, so you can see how to
people
incorporate those
study.
into your lifestyle. And we'll link to those below as well, because that can impact your blood
Surely
sugar
that
response
is
as
a
well.
good
I hope this was
tool.
helpful. Definitely please check out the links below. And if you do think this is helpful,
Yes.